This podcast is brought to you by GBS, where you'll find flexible education that fits around your busy lifestyle. For more information on GBS courses, visit globalbanking.ac.uk.
Hello, we're very privileged to have Anne-Marie O'Shea, an inspirational businesswoman, an Irish woman who's made such a success in business in the UK, and we're pleased to be able to ask her some questions and get to know her and give us some of her wisdom about business and some questions from our students, which I'm sure we're going to get to later, and I'm sure the students are going to be very pleased to hear about your journey. So can I just ask you, Anne-Marie, where did your passion for business come from? And do you come from an entrepreneurial family?
Okay, so my parents were very entrepreneurial. So that was, I suppose that's a big influence for me. My father came from Ireland. He came to London, and like many people back in the 60s, he was a builder and then eventually had his own company. By the time I was 12, we decided to move back to Ireland. That was in 85, and we had a pub. So it was a family pub, so it was all hands on deck. From 12 years of age, I worked pretty much all weekends. And it really got us to understand how a family unit can pull together and make a difference. It was almost like an escapism as well from school, because I could be my own person and a different person. When you talk about business, I guess I was always determined to make something for myself. I was almost written off at school because I had dyslexia, but nobody actually knew what it meant at the time. So my parents and my teachers, they all kind of struggled with me. With my report said, struggles with reading, spelling is terrible. I was terrible at French, couldn't understand anything on history or geography. So it was pretty much, there's nothing going to happen. So I was determined to make a difference and to work hard. I didn't go to university, unfortunately, but I would have loved to have done. So I went to Dublin and held down 3 jobs at one stage. And then I moved to London to start in fashion. I was really fortunate that I had a job offer in Wallace. I was the fit model and design room assistant, but I didn't actually like doing that. It was like trying clothes on all day. And I wanted to get into merchandising, which was maths, analytics and maths and product knowledge. So as soon as there was an opportunity, I jumped in and then worked my way through and worked hard and worked my way up. So that's where it started.
Thank you. I mean, I think, coming from a similar background as well, my family came from Ireland. You're further up the west, aren't you? My family came from the very west, and you're up from Galway, wasn't it?
So we lived in Mayo.
Mayo.
Yeah,
that's
yes,
it, Mayo.
Yeah. So it was a very different culture from London.
And Dublin even.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was always, it was almost so I didn't quite fit in at the time, because I was the London girl moving to Mayo, and then when I came back to London, I was the Irish girl.
Yes, and then and we all know about that kind of that kind of thing about the kind of families who come here and work so hard, don't they, to try and make a success of things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
and you seem to have got some of that, or a lot of it.
I think that was it. I think it was inbuilt. All my sisters were the same. We've all worked really hard.
Yeah.
And the things that we love. So my older sister is CFO in New York, and my other sister works in a bank. And it's just, I think we had that inbuilt into us.
Yes. We'd like to know a little bit more about your studies then, because you've spoken to me before about your dyslexia. And you said just now you don't have an academic background. Could you just talk a bit more about the dyslexia?
Yes, I suppose it was. I remember when I could first. I knew there was something wrong when I was at primary school, when I couldn't read. I'd sit there and the words were jumbled, and my spelling was atrocious. And the teachers would just say I needed to try harder, must try harder. All the reports said the same, that I was below. And even though I thought I was fine, but I knew there was problems that I had. But then I also knew I was good at art and good at maths, so it was such an interesting challenge to see different teachers would say different things about me. It also affected me, obviously, with my confidence. It affected my self-esteem. And it took until, I would say, 10 years ago to really understand myself and understand how to manage it. So I learned how to manage it through learning things by heart, by not doing presentations that I'd read. So it was kind of a slow process, but now I can see it, and I can see that I just want people to know that you can get on. If you have something like this, it's not impossible to get on.
That's very
and
good.
it's very different these days. There's so much more care and attention and different systems that can be used.
Yes. And there's quite a lot of support for that at GBS, you know. So perhaps now, as you say, nowadays there are these things don't go undetected, and you are supported in your learning trajectory. What has been the biggest influence on you personally? Or sorry, who has been the biggest influence on you personally and professionally? So it's a double question.
Okay. I guess as you can tell, I've been referring to my family so much. So definitely my parents, they have done so much for me. Obviously not knowing what was wrong, but they also have my younger sister's very ill. She has a disease called neurofibromatosis, where she grows tumours internally. She's needed a lot of care. So they've put everything on hold to care for her. And it's just lovely to see that they've managed to balance all of us and our careers and our welfare. With 5 girls, it was tough.
Gosh, it is.
But obviously the other thing now is the Ukraine president. I mean, he's such a big influence for all of us. An amazing job he's done.
Yeah, Zelensky. Yeah. He is though, isn't he? He is an inspiration to us.
It really is. Yeah. And professionally, I would say the managing director of Monsoon. So I worked at Monsoon from when I was about 24 to 30. I started off there as the international merchandiser, but eventually within the next 2 years, I became wholesale, franchise, concessions and international
That's very
head.
impressive. Yeah.
So it was because of him. He really pushed me. He got me. He could understand I was different. He called me a fluffy merchandiser because I had the art and maths. I travelled a lot. I gave up working when I had my first child because I travelled so much. So I took 2 years off. But if not, I'd probably still be there.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's 3 things there actually. You know, and I mean, when I ask people who's been the biggest influence, mostly it's going to be their parents. And also, I don't think you realise that until later on, do you? It's a kind of you have to have some perspective.
So true. Yeah. And then once I realised at the time at school, when obviously I was struggling, they didn't know what to do. They really struggled to figure out what was wrong. My sisters were straight A students. This other daughter just had the same upbringing, but just had different results.
And we're all different, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we all have different paths and different paths. Zelensky, obviously. I mean, he's the man of the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Come with the man.
Yeah.
Professionally, that was interesting that you needed this what is it, a manager, or who is it, CEO?
He was the managing director.
Yeah, you need that inspirational figure who actually kind of nurtures you as well and gives you some affirmation.
Yes, exactly. And I feel after learning about him and what he can do, that's what I've always tried to do with my staff. I often get told I was their best boss, which is lovely because I can pick up on, obviously been through so much, you can pick up on what people need to encourage them. And he did that for me, so I need to help people.
We all need encouragement, don't we?
Exactly.
Yes. So next question, running a business must be very demanding on your time. How have you achieved a good work-life balance, and how do you find time for family and friends and other commitments? And then what advice would you give to GBS students who are balancing their studies with a family, a job, or other commitments?
That's a very good question. And it's, I guess, during my upbringing, I've always known about working hard and having to put so much energy into your work. I have 2 children, one 18 and one 17. So obviously through my career, I had to balance as I travelled and spend time with them. I think what I've learnt mostly is that when you've got that time with them, with your children or with your family, it's a precious time and you need to give them everything. They need to be number one. Whatever you're doing, whether it's working or travelling, they always have to be number one. So they've always known I'd drop anything at any stage to go to them if they need it. Not that they would call me up because they want me to bring them to football, but if it's a crisis, then obviously they would be my first port of call. And I think if you have that understanding, then it just makes things a lot easier when you're going to work. And not having as much time as you can for them. They just need to feel important.
Of course. And how does that work with, say, maybe late night commitments or early morning commitments? How does that work?
I guess in many ways now, because I'm no longer with my partner, in many ways it actually makes it a little bit easier, only because they can stay with him. And in the past, he would work, but 9 to 5. So it would be quite easy to kind of juggle things. If I was away at weekends, I wouldn't go on a Sunday because that was our day. I'd always make sure I was on a Monday. So it was kind of just making sure you juggle it so it feels right for the children and for the family.
I like the idea that you have a day that was your day.
Yeah, it was our day. I remember once I went away to Sweden and I worked for Gant on a Sunday, and my son cried at the airport. So I just thought, I can't do that again. I need to have his time and then my work time.
Yeah. Very good. So what advice would you give to any budding entrepreneurs out there?
In time management?
Well, just generally, any advice?
Goodness, make sure you have your business ideas researched. Make sure you understand there is an opportunity, that there is that gap, that it's not just something that you see, but something that you can understand there's a consumer for it. The worst thing to do is to put all your time and energy into something that doesn't have a scalable business. So work hard, study hard, gain as much experience as you can, and don't jump in too quick. I think it's important to really understand where you're going. You've done your strategy, you've done your marketing work, you understand the route to market. But don't jump in too quick and spending silly amounts of money on something unless you're sure it's going to work.
Do you want to touch yet on what you're working on at the moment?
My new Annam.
Yes.
So that would be interesting. It might help people. So I've been researching seaweed for a long time and the benefits of seaweed. It helps with so many skin concerns and health problems. So it helps with psoriasis, eczema, also gut health, heart health, and it helps with women with menopause. I've known about seaweed since my grandmother. So my grandmother would put seaweed on her legs after a hard day at working in County Cork. She had 11 children. So she'd have a very busy time with setting things up or running the family. She would then sit there by the fire with her seaweed to try and ease the pain. And more I looked at products as I travelled. When I worked for obviously companies like Monsoon, Gant, for Perry globally, I would always have treatments whenever I travelled because I just wanted to find something different. But I kept returning back to Ireland to find my roots. And so now we set up a brand called Annam, Anna Namara, which means soul of the sea in Gaelic. And it's something that I feel I can make a difference to lots of people. It's a huge consumer base. It can sell. We have 12 products, but it can be sold to anyone, and it's something that will make a difference. So we're very excited.
I love that idea that it's something you're passionate about because of its properties, and yet it's also something that can make a difference.
Yes, that's really important. I think, and it's something to be able to talk to people about. And I mean, I know teenagers with problems with acne. They don't want to go out there, but we know we can help them with that. The psoriasis we can help them with, and there's just so much that we can do and give back.
Very good. You've spoken about your art and the maths. Can you say a bit more about what talents and personality traits do you think you have naturally that have helped you be successful in business? A bit more of that, maybe. And what have been the learned skills and knowledge that have had most impact on your success?
I think during my time in the business that I worked in, it's about being commercially astute. It's about understanding how to manage, understanding your customer and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So that's something that I picked up over the years, and really drilling into them to see what are they looking for, what it's for, what the occasion is, how much will they spend, what do they need to make them feel better in themselves. So it's very much about understanding your consumer and what you can do and what the brand needs to do to make things better. And it's something that you learn over time. It's not something that you can just gain by reading books, but it's something that you do need to learn and listen to people.
That's a really good thing to listen, isn't it?
And I found that when I first had Serenity and Grace, and I'd go to some of our concessions in House of Fraser, and I would spend every day on the shop floor listening to the customers, taking them out of their comfort zone, getting them to try different products.
Yeah.
And they completely changed their body shape once we found them the right clothes. It was amazing.
Wow. Tell me a bit more about how does that work then? What do you think? Tell me a bit more about that.
So I would speak to the customer about what they're looking for, where they're going to, what colours they like, what shapes they like. And then obviously I'd know the product already. So I'd say, please try this on for me. And often they would usually try it on if you coax them enough.
Yeah.
And then they would come out of the fitting room and they would change almost automatically if it was something that looked good on them. Their body shape would sit back and they would just walk differently. I loved seeing young girls from the proms doing that, because they were like these shy teenage girls. Suddenly they were young women.
Very good. That's very good. Yeah. So can I ask you, what getting started advice would you give to GBS students who are returning to studying? Okay,
so I think the most important thing is to really do your research, to know what you set out a business plan, set out a checklist of what you need to do, your priority list and a strategy. If you have something like that, at least you know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going to, you don't know where the end should be. Yeah. So you need to make sure that you've got a plan, you have a strategy, and also you understand your strengths. I think when people are starting, they try to do something completely out of their comfort zone, and that's not going to help at all. So really understand what you want to achieve, what you can achieve as well, and how you need to get there.
Planning's so important, isn't it? On a kind of micro level as well. Everything, day-to-day life planning, in your studies planning, but also the grander scheme of things planning.
Yeah, and it changes, but it's great to have a strategy in place and a business plan, and then you can tweak it as you need to.
Yes.
But I always think, I go back to my old days, but even now I have a checklist for everything. That I know who's doing what, and who can cover, and dates and whatnot.
Yeah, I have millions of lists as well. You can't really manage without making lists.
No, exactly, especially when you get older.
Yeah, and then I lose the list. Finally, then, for this section, is there a piece of advice that you have received at the beginning of your career that had an impact, such an impact that you would pass it on to others who are just getting started?
I think it's probably not quite the beginning, because I started off at quite a low level. And I think it's more as I started my own business. And I learnt to get everything checked, make sure that you have agreements in place, make sure you speak to lawyers, and don't believe people. Sorry, I know it sounds strange to say that, but you can't always trust investors, and you just have to be careful and make sure it feels right for yourself. Yeah. And I remember someone once saying, actually, it was very early in my career, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And that's something that I would say, be careful. And, also when you understand your abilities, that's really important. If you need to outsource something that you can't do. For example, I couldn't do the business side of things, as in the accounting and whatnot, but I could easily pack. So just, make sure that you're aware of your strengths and your weaknesses.
It's so important, isn't it? Yeah. Well, Anne-Marie, now we're going to do the quick fire round, which is just a few questions. GBS have campuses in cities that we all love: London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds. What's your favourite city?
Has to be London.
And why?
It's my home from home. It's where I was born. It's where I keep coming back to. So yeah, it has to be London.
Okay. Printed books or digital books?
Believe it or not, printed. I think because I find it easier to manage, and it's because I spent so long trying to manage how to read from printed that I still return back to that.
Yeah. Do you feel each one's a personal victory when you've read them?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Binge watcher or take your time with a good TV series?
Binge all the way.
What have you been binging on lately?
Oh, everything that I can possibly find. It's it's really quite strange at the weekends if I have time. Binge.
Okay. Best work at the beginning or the end of the day?
Beginning.
Me too.
Yeah. Beginning, I find I'm much better if I get up early. I would always go to the gym first when I worked for corporate companies. Leave the house at 5, go to the gym for 5:30, in the office by 8, and then be running around after a very strong coffee.
Yeah. I like to be up before everyone else is awake and get some things done.
Yeah.
Deadline hitter or deadline extender?
Hitter.
That's interesting.
Yeah, hitter for sure. I find it's quite good to have a deadline to stick to. It kind of pushes you a bit.
Yeah.
I find it motivates me more.
We need deadlines, I think, don't we?
Yes. Yeah. Even my children, they're deadline hitters. They're pretty good, thankfully. They're following in my footsteps. I hope.
Well, I think they should, yeah. Stay connected on holiday or turn off all devices?
Oh, stay connected. Yeah, it's something that I've always done, and I know I should shut off, but my kids just know that's what I do.
Well, if they know that's what you do, and they've always known that.
Yeah.
Because you're going to Italy soon, aren't you?
Yes, and I'm sure, and it's actually part work as well.
Okay.
So I'll be trying out lots of treatments for seaweed opportunities.
Yeah, and so you'll be connected then.
Yes, my children will be with me, but I'll be very much connected.
Okay. TV news or newspaper?
TV news.
Okay.
And you can imagine why.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Office based or work from home?
That's a difficult one. I think almost needs to be both. I find it really hard working from home all the time. And because I've always been out meeting people or working on the shop floor or seeing suppliers, that's a difficult one. So I'm kind of drawn. I'm allowed to be drawn.
You are allowed to be drawn. How about the process? I mean, I've got the process of going to work. I mean, I like working from home, but then also I like going to the workplace, and the journey to the work and the actual getting into that mindset is slightly different.
It's very different. It's, dressing up differently.
Yeah.
I know when COVID first hit us, I was wearing my tracksuit all the time. And then maybe I put a shawl on or something for a Zoom call, but it was very different.
Yeah.
And you didn't have quite the same mind frame.
Yeah. I think that's important, isn't it? Better to be street smart or book smart?
Street smart.
Street smart.
I think, because obviously book smart, I completely agree with. It's really important. But as you progress through your career, as I said earlier, it's about understanding what you're doing and understanding your customer. I think that's more kind of street smart and really making the most of what you have in your business.
That's interesting. Finally, the good old British debate and Irish debate, of course. Tea or coffee?
I'm afraid I'm a black coffee drinker.
You're a disgrace.
Strong black coffee.
That's disgraceful. You'll have to
No
give back
sugar.
your passport, your Irish passport. Yeah.
Yeah, no milky tea for me.
Good Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But only 1 cup a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just stick to one. That's it.
Thank you. That's the end of the quick fire round.
Phew.
Anne-Marie, the last section really are questions from GBS students, and they'll all be very eager to hear your answers. Did you know you wanted to work in the fashion business before you started your company? And if not, how did you figure out what industry you wanted to work in?
That's a good question. I always wanted to work in fashion. From when I was at school, when I was struggling, I would often draw dresses and design dresses. We had a proms, Derbs as they called it in Ireland, where back then you had dresses made. I would design all the dresses for the girls in the year. I remember in the business studies class, my teacher, he was a priest, said, Anne-Marie sorted her business out already. She's going to start designing dresses. So that was at 16. So it started then. I entered lots of competitions. And unfortunately, after my intercert, which is like GCSE level, we didn't have an art teacher. So that failed me. So something that I was good at, I couldn't continue. But I knew there was something there. I always knew I had to get into fashion. So I spent, after school, I did some modelling for 2 years. It was mainly photographic, but it helped me understand about fashion and the opportunities. So that's why I then came to London and got into Wallace. And I realised that for me, the areas I wanted to be in was buying and merchandising. So that was both product and planning.
It's interesting, that kind of idea of fashion, the inspiration. I mean, you're designing those prom dresses. Priest said you've already got your business set up. Then you go into some aspect of the fashion. Then you've kind of found a niche or a route through that's kind of for you.
Yes, I know. It's funny, isn't it? Considering the fact that I ended up Serenity and Grace was occasion wear and evening wear. So I did a full circle back from my days at 16 back to having a brand that sold prom dresses. So it was amazing.
Is that still big, selling prom dresses now? Do you?
Well, after COVID, things did slow down.
Of course,
or I should say during COVID. There's not so much competition now because many companies were closed during the pandemic. So they so it's quite hard to find dresses. But I do think more people are looking into rental. Rental is something that I think could be a good business, maybe for one of the students to look into. So that's a big niche.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. What steps did you take to start your business brand? As we can talk about math.
Yeah, so obviously with my new brand, I did a lot of research on the consumer, the product, who we could sell to, the size, the scalability. Because I knew quite a few people in the market, I knew that there could be lots of openings for me. When I looked into it more, I could see there wasn't a lot of seaweed products available. So it was something that I felt that we could maximise. There was also, the price point was very good. It was sustainable. It was natural, clean beauty, which is obviously really key at the moment. And there are so many unique selling points to the product that I knew it would be a winner.
And we were talking about that kind of idea of from where it comes from, that not, and I read earlier the difference between Dublin and the west coast of Ireland, and that has such a I mean, obviously tourists love to go there. It's an international appeal to go to the west coast, isn't it? And you're actually plugging yourself in something you already know personally, aren't you?
Yes, exactly. So it's where we're building our business is it's near the Wild Atlantic West. So it's somewhere, so the seaweed is from the Atlantic. It's very pure. That's why there's so much interest in that seaweed. It's been washed all the way through, and it comes from the US all the way through to Ireland. And that's why we believe it will make a big difference.
Excellent. Very good. Sometimes it can be challenging to raise funds to start a business yourself. Are there any options you can recommend for students who need to raise capital to start their business?
That is probably the biggest challenge. Even now, I struggle with that. There's many different ways of raising capital. Obviously, there's crowdfunding, there's venture capitalists, there's friends and family, loans, there's grants. But it's all really managing your shareholding and making sure you're not giving too many shares away. In the past, I've done that. I've given too much away for very little. And it's protecting what you believe in. So I would say go down the route of grants, definitely. You could get match funding. If your business is right, for example, with Annam, we're classed as a high potential startup. If the business is right, you will get grants funding, and then that will help with other investors coming in.
And the end of that was that loans, or even applying for loans, can be daunting, can't it? I mean,
Exactly,
the kind of processes, do you find them daunting?
It's very daunting. Also, obviously you need personal guarantees against it, and it's not easy as a startup. Once you have traction, then obviously it's much easier. But it's, I mean, I know I've had problems before with the fact that in my own business I could afford to start it up myself. But then as we grew to sustain the sales, we needed investors. Obviously that was very tough. That was challenging. But we got there.
Next question. One of our students has a turmeric farming business, and she wanted to find out if you any tips for scaling a small business.
That's a really interesting one, because turmeric is obviously is a little bit like seaweed in that it can be used in many ways. It can be used for food, skincare. I'm sure there's other things as well for natural grass and things. But I'd need to know a bit more about the business to understand how far they've scaled it. What I would suggest is to look at the competition. That's always a really important thing to do. Look at the competition, look at their outlets, be open-minded about where they could go. For example, could it be chemists? Could it be hospitals? Could it be pharmacies, hotels, food, bakeries? There's so many opportunities with turmeric. But I think, find out the opportunities. Sometimes it's good just to have a brainstorm session to see where they could go and what the opportunities are. Obviously not just in the UK, but globally.
That's very valuable advice. What would you recommend for a small business wanting to improve on marketing and engagement?
All about marketing and engagement. That's so important. Understand the route to market and the channels, the sales channels. If you understand what your customers use as social media, and obviously it's much easier to engage in the right platforms. Are they TikTok watchers? Are they Instagram followers? Are they Facebook? I mean, there's so many different channels that different customers are on. We found with Serenity and Grace, it was Facebook, which I was quite surprised. I thought with the younger people, Instagram, but it was actually Facebook that we converted really high traffic. So it's just finding the right traffic, finding how you can talk to them, tell as many stories. For example, with Serenity and Grace, I talked about different occasions. Your Debs is coming up, it's Christmas, this is what you should be wearing. Ascot, did a big Ascot rollout. And it's just attracting that attention and then keeping it.
Thank you. One of our students wants to start her own swimwear brand, but with all the information online, she does not know where to start. Would you recommend she goes down the consultancy route, or are there any courses you think she might benefit from?
She's very right that there's so much information. There's so much information online about how to start a business, and the first thing she needs to do really is make sure there is a market. I know I keep going back to this, but it's so important to make sure there's a market, there's a gap, that she understands the market. And if she wants a consultant, it should be somebody that has a different ability to her. I mean, sometimes you might have a consultant that's actually doing the same thing as you. Spend your money wisely and spend your time wisely. Speak to, try to get more working experience in that area. If she could work in a swimwear business in some way or another, just to know a bit more about it, the fabrications, the suppliers, the logistics, the shape. That's gold if she can understand that. That's how I was able to get into my own business, because I knew all of the background. And I think that's, even if it's just free work experience, it would just really help.
That's interesting. Free work experience as well. Because how can that help? Just getting you plugged into that kind of
to the network, to the suppliers, to just getting your hands on the products and the knowledge that people have.
This is the last student question. Has COVID impacted on your business at all? And if so, can you share an example of a challenge you were able to overcome?
Oh my goodness, COVID and occasion wear. That's all I can say. So obviously once COVID hit, occasions stopped. Occasions, evening wear stopped. The concessions closed. And I had to find a way out, a way to deal with the business. So I had been looking at skincare, and I realised that the way to move on is to actually bring that forward quicker. Really focus on that. It will take time for occasions and evening wear to come back. So my focus now is on the skincare, because I know it'll make a huge difference as well. But yeah, it was very, very challenging. And a lot of people lost a lot of money. And beautiful brands that have been set up were gone. So I've been lucky to survive and to be able to find something else to move into.
And do you think post-COVID, it's got some kind of, it's got definitely a kind of imminent future and a possibility of kind of
with
taking off?
We've already had people interested. We haven't launched yet. So we've got hotels in Italy. We have department stores in London and in Ireland. We have QVC in the US. A department store in the Cayman Islands, would you believe?
Wow.
So there's a lot of people already wanting to buy before we've even launched or before they've sampled. So yeah, we're very excited.
Well, Anne-Marie, this has been really impressive and of great value to the GBS students, I think.
I hope so.
Well, that idea of a life within your sector, how you came to it, the hard miles of the work that you did, and you're gaining experience, and then going into your own ventures. This is all wonderful for the students to kind of show them that this kind of possibility.
It's definitely there if I could do it.
Well, you're superior talent. I tell you what, why don't you come back and tell us how it's going in a few months' time?
Yes, I'd love to. That'd be good. Yep.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this GBS podcast. GBS is a provider of higher education with flexible courses in business, finance, accounting, healthcare, technology and construction. With courses from HND to bachelor and master's degrees and study options that include weekdays, evenings and weekends, there's a course that's right for you. Visit globalbanking.ac.uk or email the GBS team at admissions@globalbanking.ac.uk.